We are about to go live. Good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting. My name's Michael Johnson, and I'm Chairman of Planning. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are public. Good God. This is a public meeting with others, and the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on the proceedings. Please note this meeting is to be recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting the personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Appointment of substitutes.
Yes, we have Councillor Denham for Councillor Hodges. Thank you.
Declarations of interest. Sorry.
I don't know whether I need to say, I mean, absolutely no pecuniary interest, but item 7 and item 10. Predetermine the application.
Minutes of the previous meeting. Happy for me to sign them, assuming you've all read them, of course. Thank you. Minutes of the previous conservation panel. Are in the papers. Any issues, any questions? No? Take them as read. Thank you. Public participation.
No public participation, Chair.
Before we go on to a public representation, we need to address agenda item 7, which was due to have speakers. Unfortunately, the agent, who was also due to speak, is having to attend a family. Therefore, he has requested that we defer this item to our next meeting. Decision for this committee whether or not they wish to accede. Are you content to defer it, Councillor Amos?
Just a question really, Mr. Chairman. How many of the objectors are here then? Roughly?
A number of objectors, but obviously only 2 could speak. They have been.
Were they advised in advance that this might have to be deferred?
They were indeed, yeah. It's an unfortunate set of circumstances, but given those circumstances, I don't think it's unreasonable that if the committee is content, to it to. Happy to defer, members? Jenny?
Just to double check, this won't lead to the application being non-determined.
As I know, there's been extension.
I think Georgina had spoken to them and were seeking an extension to make sure.
Are we content to defer?
Yeah, I was just thinking in the circumstances, everyone has been informed. Hope the committee will agree.
Absolutely. You happy to propose? Happy to second? Those in favour? So be it. It shall be deferred. Thank you. Right. Public representation. You've got Apologies. We have in front of us two applications which are the subject of public representation. Agenda item 9, Rose Villa, and agenda item 10. Would the speakers for agenda item 9 like to come forward? Once they do so, the process is the officer will present details of the planning app. We will then go into questions and answers. Following your discussion, Georgina will keep an eye on the clock and let you know when your time is up. Andrew? Sorry. Laura.
So this retrospective application seeks to vary condition planning application 00. Specifically, condition 2 of the planning inspector's appeal decision relates to the approved plans condition. As members will recall, this application was 3rd of November last year.
Bring it forward a bit. Thanks, Laura.
Sorry about that. Yes, so members may recall that the proposed changes were previously sought under a non-material amendment application. This application was refused at Planning Committee. As such, this application for a variations condition is sought to apply for the retrospective changes. The accompanying report covers all the relevant issues and is taken as read. Before I start, I did just want to raise attention to a query that we received earlier on today. This is specifically in relation to an additional plan that's been uploaded to the previous application. These, in fact, relate to a discharge with conditions application for the previous scheme that was approved by the Planning Inspectorate. So it doesn't affect the decision making as today. It is just for a discharge of condition for that. But Sim may be able to just reflect some more.
Yeah, I think the situation is, I think they may have been a little bit premature in terms of submitting those details. The original permission that was allowed to appeal had a number of conditions attached to it. And I think what they've done is they've put the details in relation to the original permission. But the application today in front of you will actually result in a new decision notice being issued. The conditions that they're looking to discharge on the original application, should members approve this application, we've ported across those conditions onto this new decision. It means that they would still need to discharge that condition in relation to any new decision that was made if members are minded to approve it today. So they're sort of a little bit ahead of themselves in putting that information in, because they would still need to do it. If members are minded to approve this today, there will still be a condition attached to this new application which needs to be discharged. This identical condition is just that we wouldn't be able to discharge it. It wouldn't be discharged until the formal submission had come in respect of the newer application. I think they've just got a little bit ahead of themselves in terms of the process.
So I take it, the bottom line is all of the conditions from this application and the previous application, all the time, have to be satisfied.
Original permission was allowed. What we've done is, because we're effectively issuing a new decision, any conditions that haven't been discharged, we've just brought them across from the original appeal decision and put them on this one to make sure that what the inspector wanted to be done is actually done in relation to this new application.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, it may just be me being rather dense, but can Mr. Manley put that into English? Because I'm just trying to understand what we're deciding on, and it's very important given the history of this particular series of applications, if I can put it that way. Because what it says under 3.2, we're talking about retrospective amendments, I mean, everything's retrospective as far as I can see on this, but this is retrospective amendments. So what are they seeking retrospective amendments of? Presumably, obviously, something has been done. On what application were those retrospective things done that we are now being asked to make a decision on? Because I'm very reluctant to vote on something if I don't know what I'm voting on.
I think for the original application was allowed appeal and it had a number of conditions that needed to be discharged. They then built out something which was slightly different, which is now seeking to regularise through this application. When we issue, if members are minded to approve this new application, we will transfer the conditions that remain outstanding on the original permission over to the new decision to make sure that all the requirements that were originally required by the planning inspector are now covered in any new decision. And they relate to pre-occupation conditions, the things that needed to be done prior to the first occupation of the development. So the original permission wasn't built out as per plan. They're now seeking to regularise it, which is the one in front of us. And what we're doing to make sure everything is covered, we've duplicated the conditions from the original permission and put them on the new application, this new decision, to make sure everything is built out as per plan. You're not voting on the most recent details submitted, which I've talked about. They relate to the original permission. So they've basically, what they've done is they've come in and they've tried to discharge a condition on the original permission. And they've done that. That's a separate issue, and this is what was being raised. What we're saying is actually, this is an absolute brand new application. It has conditions. If those details submitted in discharging the original permission, they're effectively, if members are to approve this, they're going to be on the original permission, and they would need to actually resubmit them again to discharge a condition on any new permission should you grant permission. Very convoluted, I appreciate that, and I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. Effectively, what we're saying is you're not voting on the details, the new details that they've submitted. That's a separate matter. That's a discharge condition that they've submitted. All we're dealing with today is what's in front of you within the report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure I'm really clear. I'll do my best, but Mr. Manning talks about a new application. Right. Now, a new application for what?
When I'm talking about the new application, I'm talking about the application in front of us today. This is the variation of condition application in front of us. Yes. Sorry, it's my fault. The variation condition application, which is in front of us today, is what you're voting on. The information they've submitted is to discharge some of the conditions on the original permission, and that basically is a separate matter from what's in front of us today.
Right, so we don't need to know about that then if it's not before us today?
Yes, it was raised by the local residents as saying, well, does this need to be taken into consideration? And what we're trying to say is the information submitted is a separate matter from this. It's detail, but it relates to the original permission. What's in front of you is this application. But the point I was making was the detail that they're trying to discharge on the original permission is actually conditioned on this application as well. So they would still need to submit, if members were to approve this, they would still need to discharge that condition on this new permission. What I was saying.
It begs the question, you're going to tell me planning law doesn't allow this, why we just didn't carry forward the inspector's decision and his planning conditions onto this one. Although
We've transferred the original planning conditions. Will change. It is a new decision notice. Because it is a new decision notice, it has its own conditions attached. And what we did was we took the original appeal decisions and we've just attached them because it is going to effectively renew a new decision. We've attached it to this permission. Or this application, sorry, now in front of you.
I think, Mr. Chair, that may be a confusion. Mr. Manning talked about the original appeal decision, but I understand there are two appeal decisions on a 4-bed and a 6-bed. Is that right? There are two appeal decisions or just one appeal decision?
The most recent one that they're seeking to amend, the plans that they've applied for the variation against, is the latest 6-bed. I take it's the 6-bed. They're seeking to vary the 6-bed, but in doing so, we will need to ensure that the original conditions requiring certain things to be done are also attached to any new permission. So this variation has to have the original conditions pulled across onto it to make sure everything required by the inspector is done effectively. It's a bit convoluted, but it is, and I do apologise for not being able to explain it more simply, but it is very, very complex. But effectively, what we're seeking to do is make sure that this new permission, if members are minded to approve it, with this new application, all conditional requirements imposed by the inspector are also included with any future permission should you approve it.
Yes, so just to go into the changes, see just the first slide shows the most recent amended plans submitted with this application. This also, as you can see, it highlights the location of the dwelling on Nunnery Lane, adjacent to properties Montana and Rose Villa. As the amendments have already been made to the dwelling, we do, as before, have the benefit of being able to see them as built. The next slide. Yes, so as you can see, the following slides just show some photographs of the dwelling that were taken at a previous site visit on the 22nd of February. As you can see, the front of the dwelling with the dual gabled frontage. This slide just is just a closer view of the dwelling. Slide, please. Moving to the other side of the dwelling now. Slide, please. The following next slide just illustrate the retrospective changes in context with the plans that were approved at appeal. As you can see, this slide shows the front elevation of the dwelling as consented by the planning inspectorate at the top of the slide, with the current retrospective changes below. Just to clarify, the purple line on the top slide just relates to a previous application, not relate to a change in the overall ridge height between this application and the inspector's appeal decision. The changes to the front of the dwelling that are sought by this application are outlined in red. These include the alteration of the central first floor window in the front elevation, the omission of the previously proposed chimney, the alteration of the first floor Juliet balcony windows on the front, the alteration of the gable windows, the alteration of the roof of the front porch, and the reduction in the height of the two front gable windows that you can see outlined in red. Concerns have been raised regarding, during the course of the application, regarding the overall ridge height of the dwelling. The overall ridge height has been checked on site with the planning enforcement officer. It was considered that this was in accordance with the inspector's previously approved plan. It is considered that the reason for this concern may be because of the height of the front gable window, the front gables, as you can see there, is lower than as previously approved, which increases the distance between the top of the gables to the top of the overall dwelling. The area of this change is just shown by the red changes, the red boxes at the top of the. The next slide, please. These next two slides just show the plans in larger view, if anybody wanted to look closer at it. Next slide, please. And again, these are the proposed changes. Slide, please. The reduction of the height of the front gable windows can be seen on this slide with the photograph below. As you can see, that the gables at the front is lower than the overall ridge height. Next slide, please. Just to provide some further context, this next slide just shows a view from one of the top floor gable windows. Please. Moving on to the changes proposed at the rear of the dwelling, this slide just shows the rear elevation with the previously consented at the top and the most recent proposals. Again, with the changes highlighted in red. The changes to the rear elevation that are sought include the relocation of the 5 consented roof lights and the 6th roof light in the rear elevation. The alteration of the rear patio doors, the change to the style of the rear door of the dwelling, but it is worth bearing in mind when considering the changes to the patio doors that these changes, if the dwelling was occupied, would likely fall under household permitted development. Slide, please. Again, just the plans in a larger view again. Slide, please. Changes highlighted in red. Slide, please. And as you can see, this just shows a photograph of the roof lights in the rear roof slope. Next. Again, just another photograph of it taken from a lower down view. These two, next slide, please. The next 2 photographs that you can see here are just showing the internal of the dwelling, showing the roof height of the Velux windows above floor level, which is quite well above head height. Now looking at just the proposed site plan of the dwelling, the proposals also introduce a change paving of the rear patio from grasscrete blocks to permeable paving. See with the large red box that's just outlining that area there. During the course of the application, a number of concerns have also been expressed regarding fencing at the site. This has been also included on the annotations that you can see, red boxes at the top and on the right-hand side of the dwelling. The rear, next slide please. Rear fencing is also highlighted by the red box, as you can see on this image, rear of the site. A number of concerns have also been raised at the site regarding the erection of a front wall. We have been aware of this and have advised that this wall is removed. As the photograph shows, this has been mostly removed. However, to ensure that the wall is fully removed and replaced with a hedge as originally approved, condition has been recommended to this. Next slide, please. And this slide just shows a closer view of the fence at the rear of the site. As members are aware, the site has got an extensive planning history. Just wanted to draw members' attention to the restrictions on the site that were imposed with the appeal scheme regarding permitted development. Include the removal of permitted development rights on both residential extensions and outbuildings. It is important to note that with the removal of permitted development rights, it doesn't preclude all development on the site with regard to extensions. What it means is that they will be required to submit a planning application to apply for the changes. So the site's also, it's also worth bearing in mind the site is, as we've discussed earlier, the site is subject to a number of prior occupation conditions at the site relating to renewable energy, soft landscaping and surface water drainage that would need to be discharged prior to the occupation of the dwelling. If the conditions are not discharged prior to the occupation of the dwelling, Council could investigate the expediency of taking enforcement action at the site. A number of the objections to this application are also regarding the principle of development. However, the principle of development at this site is already established by the... For the reasons set out in section 7 of this report, it is recognised that this is a very balanced case. However, it is officer opinion. The amendments sought are acceptable in terms of the impact on design, appearance of the dwelling, and would not have an unacceptable impact on.
We now move to public speaking. Mr. Chambers.
Can I start? Good afternoon, everybody. Since the Planning Committee meeting, when the previous retrospective planning application was refused due to the sheer number of retrospective changes being sought, making them cumulatively material rather than non-material, and also the last meeting when Plan N was withdrawn due to the inaccuracies and a decision deferred, building works carried on without a break. This despite the fact that Plan I, an incredible 6 plans back, is the actual approved plan. The plan itself was only accepted on appeal with an extra condition set by the Planning Inspectorate that, quote, development is carried out in accordance with this approved plan in the interest of certainty. The decisions made by the Planning Committee and the Planning Inspectorate have been ignored, and we're still in a position of uncertainty. We now have Plan P, and I understand Q is now on the portal too, and the same retrospective application to vary that fundamental condition set by the Planning Inspector. It appears that this application is an attempt to bypass the decisions made by the Planning Inspectorate and the Committee. Furthermore, the number of deviations from plan have increased since the last refusal, and also Plan P is still not an accurate reflection of the build. If this retrospective variation is allowed, the whole point of the process and the enormous amount of time and effort spent on considering this development once again comes into question. Allowing condition 2 to be varied will consequently negate the condition set by the Planning Inspector and allow Plan P to become acceptable with a new set of conditions, which are much less stringent than before. What other conditions will then be ignored? Perhaps more relating to the environment, landscaping, planting or drainage, extensions and outbuildings, access, traffic safety and parking, or the design and quality of the build. We strongly object to this application and believe that it should be refused, and the applicant encouraged to submit a full retrospective application with all previous conditions, including condition 2 in place, and with all deviations from Plan I openly and fully included. If that full application is then refused and ultimately goes to appeal again, surely the Planning Inspectorate are best placed to make a decision as they impose the conditions, including condition 2, in the first place. Thank you.
I object on 2 main points of this application. Firstly, during the last planning meeting, this committee said that the plan wasn't accurate and it should go back to have the inaccuracies put right. We've now got, after 3 months, Plan P, which still has at least 11 inaccuracies on it. Even less important elements could have actually been included. The meat impact states the roof height is accurate to the drawings. However, the as-built has 3 full-height rooms in it, and the approved Plan I has 2 full-height rooms and another room floor which only has crawl space. The meat impact has a front elevation view that does not reflect the as-built picture which is below it. As stated, the gables have been reduced on the plan, but they don't actually reflect the photograph. The developer has installed very tall fences around the property, but has made no provision for wildlife to transit through or make habitat in the green space. There is continued confusion as the Plan P states the rear boundary will have hedging and trees, but it also says it will have a fence and shrubs. These inaccuracies, like others, will make it difficult for the enforcement officer to enforce. The meat impact says the developer is intending to install an air source heat pump. However, the building has been fitted with the gas boiler and mains. The energy statement published today has also got in it that a gas boiler will be fitted and they're not going to put an air source heat pump in. The developer could just declare these changes to the heating system without deceiving the planning process. I find it difficult to see how the councillors can be asked to make a decision without accurate information, especially as Plan Q, revised Plan P and a contradictory energy statement was published today. Secondly, the Inspectorate set condition 2, the subject of this application, and said, I have imposed a condition required that the development is carried out in accordance with the approved Plan I. This is in the interest of certainty. There are approximately 27 variations from the Plan I. The Planning Office does have the discretion to approve minor amendments, but 27 seems to be too many to approve. This includes significant changes such as the increased roof height by about a metre. I request that this application is not approved and that it is that the inspector has the opportunity to actually review it.
Very much. Questions for our speakers?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just confirm, so what you're saying then in the round is that the information we have is inaccurate, therefore we should not proceed on that basis. Is that the gist of your argument?
I believe some of the information is not accurate. Yeah.
Other questions? Councillor Denham?
I heard right. One of the things you said is about internal dimensions and how many. So have you actually been into the property?
No, you can see from the information I submitted on my objection that there are 2 extra rows of breeze block which have been included compared to the original plans, and also the roof is steeper now than it was before. And with that, and also from a photograph, you can see in your plans that the ceiling has now got a wide, flat area, whereas before it was just pointed.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you met the enforcement officer or not, but the number of allegations is that the building is according with the planning condition which was Spectre passed. So do you think that the ridge line or the wall is removed? One of the terms and conditions are, I think the officer said that they have to go back to the hedging sort of rather than solid wall, and it's been removed. Are you aware of that or not?
I believe from what you can see from the roadside that part of the wall has been removed, the piers have been removed, the foundations, as shown on the photograph you just saw, are still up to about 2 foot tall for the wall.
Sorry about that. Any other questions for the speakers?
Just follow up, sorry to prolong this argument, just to reiterate, you'd be happy then if it was the bricks or the wall is removed completely in your eyes. I'm sure that you would be accurately informed us or the enforcement officer if that was the condition, which we already got.
I think the wall is actually a side issue compared to everything else. I mean, all the way around the back of the property, originally it was going to have hedging and it was going to have trees, allowing wildlife to live and transit, which is 8 foot tall on my side of the property, and that will stop any animals or any wildlife transiting between the gardens, which they were able to before.
Councillor Roberts?
Just point of procedure. We're asking a question, we're not getting an answer. Not that it's anybody's fault, but that's the way it is. And when Mr. Chambers and his neighbour sits down, we've lost the opportunity to interact. But Councillor Amos referred to these inaccuracies. It seems, I know things are not black and white, but we have 2 people here saying we've got inaccuracies. But I'm not hearing from our officers that this is not the case. Could, while he's still here with the opportunity to speak, could I ask through you, Chair, if the officers believe there are inaccuracies, and if there are they significant in material planning terms?
So the height of the dwelling has been checked on site with the planning enforcement officer, so the overall ridge height. It was considered that this was in accordance with the plans. The height of the gables at the front that I brought up on the presentation, that is in fact lower, which we think it makes it appear higher, but in reality the overall ridge height is correct. It's the gables that are lower, which is creating a bigger distance between the top of the gables to the overall height of the dwelling. So was there any other queries?
I think we're saying in the professional view there are no material alterations, or the plans that we've been presented with are accurate, irrespective of what else we're being told. We're being told that they are accurate.
Yeah, I think the officer's saying that there was queries over the height of the building as built, because obviously it's a retrospective, and they've queried, that's been raised previously, and the officer and the enforcement officer have looked at that, and they're saying that it is the correct height. They're saying that the officer is actually saying that the plans in front of you are considered to be acceptable, are considered to be accurate as per what's on site. It's just that's being disagreed by the local residents, but the officers are saying, we've been outside, we've checked it, we consider those plans are an accurate reflection of what's actually been built.
Thank you for the clarity. And now, can I ask my question? Where do you feel that the plans are inaccurate?
You were just shown a photograph of the top floor of this property, showing a 6.5-foot window plus a triangle above it. That makes the room about 7.5 foot tall. On Plan I, it shows that that area is only about 4 foot tall. Therefore, somewhere an extra 4 foot has been gained in this building. If it's roof height, or they've made the other floors shorter, I don't know. But I don't expect they have, because you wouldn't be able to get into the other floors.
When we're looking at a planning application, we're obviously looking at the external appearance of the building. The internal configuration of the building is covered on the plans, but what we're saying is that when you're assessing the impact of a building, you're looking at the size, mass and bulk and the external appearance, the height of the building. And we've been out on site, and that has been looked at and assessed by our enforcement officer, and saying that the actual height of the building is as per plan, and that's what's in front of you today. That's considered to be acceptable, because that's, it's recommended for an approval. So we are saying that what's out on site and what's on plan is accurate. What's being applied for is accurate. The issue with the local residents is they're actually saying that what's built on site and the plans in front of you don't tally. And what we're saying is, actually, in terms of the ridge height and through the presentation that Laura put forward, that with the photographs, that is in fact correct. The actual height of what's being built is actually what's been shown on plan, in accordance with what the office has done. And this has been the subject of a significant amount of visits by the enforcement officer, case officer.
Thank you. If you have no more questions, surely. Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I just ask the previous gentleman speaker, can I ask him a question? I just want to clarify, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Do I understand correctly that your concern, I forget, is it Mr. Chambers or Mr. Ruff?
Chambers. Yeah.
Mr. Chambers.
Yeah.
Can I just confirm that your concern is that things have been built not according to the plan, and that those outstanding items are still there? In other words, they're unauthorised. Is that the gist of your concern about this application?
For me, partly, but I think for me it's more of an overriding issue that condition 2 actually allows certainty. That's the thing, rather than going into the detail of this and that and the other. I think there are lots of inaccuracies, and Kevin's described them very well. And I think including the height as well. I can't understand how the planning department have actually come to the conclusion that the height is correct. It seems impossible to me too. But for me, it's more about having certainty after 20 years of uncertainty. We're now on the 15th plan with this. 15 plans, unbelievable. And Plan Q has just gone in today, and we're considering Plan P. Now, I don't know whether you can actually consider that in your debate or not, but for me, it just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. It's just about trying to get some kind of certainty. The Planning Inspectorate, who are supposedly the highest, planning body in the land, came up with this, accepted this plan, which, I didn't particularly like. It's a 6-bedroomed house right next to my mum's. It's just a massive wall. And I didn't like that conclusion, but they came to that conclusion and so accepted it. Fine, that's it. There's no appeal against that. That was Plan I. That was ages ago. That's the approved plan. We're now 6 plans on. None of these other plans have been approved. None of them. They've either been refused or have just gone to the planning department and accepted without public consultation. And for me, that's very wrong. So what I want is some kind of certainty, and the only way I can see of getting it is going back to Plan I. I mean, I might be naive here, I don't know, but going back to Plan I and saying this was the plan that was accepted by the Inspectorate. Let's go back to that, see where we are now, see what the deviations are, and move from there. But keep all of the conditions that were originally put in by the Inspectorate. Why remove those, including Condition 2? It doesn't make sense. We should consider the whole, or you should, consider the whole thing. That for me is the issue, really. Certainty after all these years. It's been a long time. It'd be nice just to have, okay, the house is there, nobody's going to knock it down, we understand that. There's a 6-bedroom house there, accepted, but can we build to the plan and everybody know what's going to happen in the future? That's it, really. Sorry, I've probably gone on.
Can I ask planning, what's the difference between Plan P and Plan Q?
The plan in front of you that you've seen and is the application that we are determining. Those are the plans. Plan Q, I think, is relating to the matter we talked about in terms of the discharge condition relating to the original permission, which we talked about previously. What's in front of us is the application to determine. I think the issue here and the concerns over the planned condition 2 that the inspector imposed, that's imposed, as you'll see throughout the agenda, where we grant or where we recommending approval, we always put on a condition, invariably put on a condition saying development shall be carried out in accordance with approved plans. Because but that is to ensure that that proposed development is built out. Now, what's happened subsequent to that is that this person has built out a different scheme and is now seeking to regularise it through another application, which is the one in front of you now. It is, you have to, and as you notice, the application is for variation of condition 2 because that's the process to try and regularise these changes. They have to vary condition 2 of the original permission to allow us to consider the new scheme in front of you. The scheme in front of you is the one that's to be determined. Condition 2 isn't sacrosanct in terms of the planning inspector. People, in terms of all planning applications, can seek to change any permission and put a planning application in. If they so wish, that's their choice, and they can seek to vary that. In this instance, they've done so after they've undertaken the works, and now they're going back and trying to seek to regularise that through the variation of conditions to allow the new plans, incorporating all the different changes, to be brought in front of you for you to consider. So that is what's in front of us today. The fact is the planning inspector put a condition in historically doesn't mean to say that they can't exercise the right to seek a variation. The application in front of us is what we're here to determine.
So essentially what our officer is saying is that the planning inspector can only decide, just as a planning committee can only decide on what's in front of him or her. That doesn't mean that the applicant can't come back at a later date to the planning committee with other applications on the same, which is what's happened.
Precisely.
Any more questions for the objectors? No, in which case. Apologies. It appears the applicant has decided not to attend. I must admit, I was going to say when he met the table or came to the table, he's actually done nothing to make too many friends in this room. But open discussion, questions, comments? Amos.
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. I think that the non-appearance of the applicant really summarises what I was going to say. I think there's a history on this site, complete contempt for this committee. Whilst we can't take into account anything as retrospective on planning grounds, I accept that. The fact is that we have a duty to protect the integrity of this planning committee and the planning process. And it has been traduced year after year after year. And I think it's disgraceful and it needs to be put on record, the way this committee has been treated. And I'm sick and tired of these applications coming before us for retrospective things, because the applicant has chosen not to carry out the permission given. This planning process has to depend on the goodwill of all the parties involved. And that is that when planning permission is given, that permission and that permission only is carried out. Otherwise, the whole thing is a waste of time. So I've got some particular questions, Mr. Chairman, if I may, and it refers to paragraph 3.1. And I think to be helpful, if Mr. Manning can just give me a yes or no, unless my questions are so perverse and inexplicable. The first thing is, the inspector has heard a case and he has put a condition on, and the applicant is seeking to vary one of those conditions. Is that correct? Correct, thank you. It then goes on to say that an application was subsequently refused by this committee because it felt that cumulatively the number of changes that had already been made were material. Is that correct?
Correct.
Good, so far, so let's make it 3 out of 3, Mr. Chairman. So what we're being asked today, and I assume this is, I don't know what letter application this is, but it's seeking to regularise further changes under paragraph 3.2, and I understand there are 9 changes, and so what we're being asked to do, whether what application it is or what appeal it was, we're being asked to regularise 9 changes subsequent to our earlier decision on another matter that they were material. So is it the case that officers are saying these 9 changes are not material?
We are saying that they are minor material. The actual application is seeking to vary, because if you remember rightly, when it came before, it came as a non-material amendment, and I think it was yourself, Councillor, who put forward the motion that the cumulative impact of that could not be viewed as being non-material, which is in fact why the application was determined as it was. Subsequent to that, this application has come in. It is seeking a variation in condition to allow the amendments to be dealt with through that process, the Section 73 application. And yes, it is seeking the changes as contained within the report for you to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is Mr. Manley saying that, again, to put it in simple terms as I can, that we're being asked to regularise further breaches of a previous planning permission?
Yes, entirely. That's correct.
Thank you. I think, well, just to really just summarise, Mr. Chairman, I mean, what more can one say? It's so familiar, isn't it? I am concerned that we're in danger here of giving the impression that we grant planning permission or we don't on the basis of salami slicing. In other words, somebody comes along for an application, gets permission, then does something else. Or, if it's refused, goes to an appeal, perfectly right to do so. The inspector then makes a decision and puts conditions on, and those conditions are traduced, and so the applicant has to come back here again to regularise more breaches of conditions. So the problem I now have, Mr. Chairman, is that if we were to grant this today, on what basis could I be assured that what we're giving permission for would equally not be traduced in the next few months, and therefore they'll be back for future retrospective? So this is what I'm saying about trust. We give permission on the basis that what we're giving permission for will be carried out. History of this site shows that you can't rely on that anymore. And given the complexity of this, and given what the objectors say, I would be much happier, Mr. Chairman, if we could defer this at least, because I'm not satisfied yet that we have all the accurate information before us. And if there is any doubt, certainly in this application of all applications, one thing I think we've got to have is 100% certainty in the minds of every member, given the history of this site. If the committee decides not to defer it, then I will move refusal, again, on the grounds that these 9 changes are material and therefore not acceptable.
Thank you. Can I ask you, Sim, can we actually push this back to the planning inspector? I was the planning inspector, fairly hacked up.
Okay, there's a couple of points that just need clarity on and to advise you on. Just because an application is retrospective, the individual does that at their own risk. That is not a reason to refuse it. The application in front of you is to consider whether or not you consider the changes to the building as built are acceptable. So you carry out a planning judgment and look at it and say, I've looked at it, that wasn't what was approved, but I've looked at the development, I've looked at the plans, I've looked at the photograph, and I'm happy that they are, that the changes are acceptable. Or alternatively, in your planning judgment, you look at it and you say, well, no, I think that the changes are so unacceptable that we recommend. The fact it's a retrospective shouldn't be taken into consideration, and that's entirely proper. In terms of going back to the inspector, if you were to refuse this, then I would imagine it's highly likely that the applicant would then go to appeal against the refusal of that permission. Just as a point of clarification to assist Councillor Amos, you said that you would be minded to refuse this on the fact that they are material changes. It would be, we reckon that the reason it's in front of us is because it's a material change, the plans that were approved. So that's why it's here to be looked at and to be considered. It would be, if you were to refuse it, it was because you didn't like what the changes that taken place. So it's just a matter of clarification. Councillor.
I'm grateful to Mr. Manley because he has actually clarified the situation and simplified it. Yes, so it is accepted that these collectively are a material. It's a question whether we think, therefore, on that basis they should be accepted or not. So I would move refusal, not minded to, refusal on the grounds that cumulatively that they're not acceptable. But could I just ask separately also, and I think it's important, Mr. Chairman, all these items that are outstanding, I don't know for how long they've been outstanding and what other items are outstanding, but what enforcement action have we taken? Because again, I think it's the lack of enforcement action that encourages people like this to do what they want and think they can get away with it.
The actual application to regularise this is off the back of us going to speak to them and tell them that they need to regularise the development as it's been built out. So we have, the reason why we got the application in front of us is because we've been out to them and said, look, what you're building needs to be regularised through the submission of a planning application, which they've done. So we have been out, or we do regularly go out and look at the site. We have been out, I think yesterday, to have a look at it. So we have been out and we do go out regularly to look at the site. So it has been the subject of ongoing enforcement action. It's just in this particular instance, we've invited an application to allow members to consider the changes. So that's the route we've gone down to date.
Sorry, I've got Pat first, then I'll come to you.
Thank you. I should add that prior to the committee starting, Mr. Chambers and Mr. Ruff asked for clarification of some of the information. Offer clarification, but didn't offer a view. I've been up to this site twice in the last 2 weeks. What do you say about it? I mean, it's obvious that this applicant has gamed the system. We know that. It's pretty obvious. And most of us on this committee are probably extremely cheesed off, and none more so than me, because I represent the area. You can imagine what I feel, because I thought the planning inspector made a wrong decision. I'd really like planning inspectors to come as we do, to look at their decisions sometimes and see what they would do now. I think this is a beauty. Anyway, I've had my whinge. Let's get to the application. There are other changes that actually aren't on here, or aren't particularly well dealt with, I think. The fencing all the way up the side and round the back is about head height. When I went up the first time, I think some of it was mesh, rather like the muggers, you know, this heavy mesh. I see that down the side at the moment, it's sort of concrete pillars and boarding. I'm not sure I quite expected that last time we approved the application. And I do think that it blocks the wildlife corridor, so it goes against SWDP 38 in my view. And I'd really like to see that fencing removed. So if that were to happen, you'd need to add to condition 3 here, because that's only about the front wall. You saw the front of the house, there is this paling fence again, which is concrete posts with slats, wooden slats. And behind that, there is a breeze block wall being built. So I'm not sure what condition 3 refers to. I presume it refers to just the breeze block wall, but I'd really rather like it to refer to the fact that the paling fence should go all the way round, including the front. Because the wildlife simply can't get through that. There's no question. So if we were to approve, I would want that condition to be much clearer. So that's condition 3. I really don't feel that I can approve this as it stands. The accumulation of changes really is material, and all I can see is that it's going to go on, and we have to call a halt. And in refusing this application, that's really what I hope to do. I hope the government inspector will in this case agree with us.
Thank you, Pat. Jenny?
Here we go again. I really feel for the neighbours. They lost effectively when the building was decided for the Green Network site. They thought that at least they knew what they were getting. And instead, it's just grown and grown like Topsy. And after this application, we know there's another one coming through. So it's going to keep on coming. I think we should have had a site visit, and in future, if we get problems like this, we need to have site visits so we understand it better. I believe the applicant is acting in bad faith. He took a risk, and I think that we ought to start enforcement action, especially in light of the fact that we know that further applications are in the wind. I think it's absolutely unacceptable that somebody can play fast and loose, not only with local democracy, but with their neighbours as well. So I'm definitely against this application.
Thank you, Jenny. Councillor Denham?
I'm only an occasional substitute on was an kind of deja vu, and I don't know exactly what's occurred in between. Hear the frustration in the I don't know, I'm coming to it fresh, if you like, with just what is in front of us in terms of it is extremely someone builds differently. The enforcement action is to bring an amended plan application. Not the first time it's happened. So there is undoubtedly material change to what has been previously approved, which is why we've got the key thing is how different is it and how important are those differences. Looking at the, you know, it's a bit like a spot the difference game. How many differences can you spot? You know, and what's the prize and what's the impact? I'm not sure that the changes that are there, the changes in front of us, the ridge height is the measured ridge height. Days ago, it is an accurate ridge height, so that is not a material, not a significant difference. Windows are a different shape. Does that matter? They're not to be overlooking in a different direction. There is clearly a huge amount of emotion. Critical are planning issues. But without some of the emotion. Worthy of review.
Yeah, just for a matter of clarification, the ridge height was it wasn't measured 2 days ago. It has been measured, but it wasn't 2 days ago. For a matter of clarification, and actually, I have to say that Councillor Denham has actually summarised very well how we need to be assessing the application, because it is very subjective, emotive. It has irritated a lot of people the way that the application has been dealt with, and the fact that it is retrospective and they have continued to make changes. But the important factor here is what we need to compare is what was historically approved by the planning inspector and what's being sought now as changes. Not that it's not that the changes have taken place. That's not a reason for refusal. You have to assess whether or not, or approval, you have to assess whether or not what's in front of you now is acceptable, and whether or not you consider that what's being built is unacceptable in terms of visual appearance. So it is a case of very carefully considering in a planning balance as to view the application as to whether or not what's approved is the difference so much and so harmful that you would justify a refusal. It is a planning balance. Obviously we've got an officer's recommendation for approval, but it's for members to make that decision whether or not they consider that what's been built is unacceptable, and that would be the reason, that would form any reason for refusal. The fact that it's materially different isn't a reason for refusal itself. It would be whether or not those changes you consider unacceptable from a visual perspective.
Thank you for that, Sim. Councillor Roberts next, I think.
Thank you, Chair. just on retrospective approval, in case it's thought that this is a builder and, you know, the Royal Hospital took 12 months, continued to build, and then went for retrospective approval. So it's something, it's a systematic problem that you can't lay at the hands of any individual applicant. They're allowed to do it. And furthermore, it's positive. It's not the role of this planning committee to punish people because they make it a retrospective application. It just can't be. Bad administration, I suggest. So it comes down to this matter. I mean, the roof heights, there's a professional view on there. It comes down to these 9 changes and whether they're cumulative, whether the cumulative effect means that we should not approve it. Now, what I'm struggling with is what would you take out to mean that it wasn't a cumulative effect? Would you reduce, move the roof lights? Would that mean that would make it okay, or change the gable end, or change the paving? I'm struggling. If we're going to refuse, can I be told, as an alternative refusal, which ones we could take out and say, okay, it's no longer a cumulative?
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I did put my hand up second after Sir Alan, but I'm gladly that he overtakes the committee as usual. As you would, I was here last time, and I think we aired it quite enough. And I take the regimental view of the residents who say that this has been ongoing for about 20 years or so. And the latter question that was referred again by the residents was that, look, it's there for six-bedroom house. We're not going to knock it down, but there was a regimental that it should go back to the inspector or get the original decision. We're here, and I think I was quite clear to hear Laura's and Sim's evidence to say that they've been visiting the site numerous times, and then the enforcement officer also went and said that it was according and advised, and obviously we are here on those assumptions and those reasons. The application is in front of us. So I'm going to nick my head up the power pit and say I'm going to ask to support the recommendation for approval as recommended by officers. So there you go.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. We've been told several times that the roof height has been assessed. Has it been assessed by someone looking at it, or has it been physically assessed with a tape measure? And if it has, what's the size of it? Does that fit with what was agreed? Because no one's told me a figure yet, and I'd like to hear it.
Always looking for it.
Yes, so the height was measured on site. It was measured using laser measure internally. So I don't have the record of what we wrote down for the internal measurement, but I can say what the measurement is for the overall ridge height, which was this. So the ridge height on this current plan is 8.45 metres. The eaves height is 7.96 metres. Whereas when you compare that to the appeal scheme, the ridge height was the same, but the eaves, the gable height was the 8.26 metres, which is where the discrepancy is.
I don't want to know what the measurement is on the paper. I want to know what it is in real life. Top of the roof.
I don't have that information to hand.
Sorry, Chairman, I forgot to mention the condition I think Pat was referring to about Wowler. I'd tend to have that condition on to have the sort of circulars or some mechanism that the wildlife could get through, especially hedgehogs that I'm referring about.
Councillor Amos, are you minded to restate your...
Yes. Just a couple of comments, Mr. Chairman. I'll be happy to repeat that. What members said is very interesting, and that I can understand what everybody's saying. And it comes down to the question of what has been built without planning permission, whether that is acceptable to the committee or not. That's a fundamental question. And as I see it, the committee has refused a 4-bedroom property, subsequently refused a 6-bedroom property. It subsequently refused an enormous number of retrospective changes. Now, I find it very difficult to say, well, having refused a 4 and a 6 and all these retrospective changes, these new retrospective changes are suddenly now acceptable. So that's the position I've come to. And of course, as Mr. Manny quite rightly said, in using our judgment, it is a subjective opinion, but I mean, that's all we can do. And I've been told on numerous training sessions, and Mr. Manny's confirmed it in a conversation with me, an inspector will simply look to see whether, in coming to our decision, we have made a reasoned judgment. In other words, we've got reasons for coming to the decision. He's not going to criticise us for making a decision as long as it's done sensibly and properly on the basis of all the facts. We spent some time discussing this, I think, on I forget how many committee meetings. So we've done it reasonably, we've done it properly, but at the end of the day, we have to make a judgment, a decision on whether all this lot is acceptable in the light of our 3 previous refusals, the 4, 6-bedroom and all these other retrospective changes. So I just don't see how we can now say at this point, this is acceptable when all the others weren't. So what I'm suggesting, Mr. Chairman, is that we refuse it on the grounds that they are not acceptable in relation to the application, the permission. Well, we didn't, but the permission that was given by an inspector. So refusal on those grounds.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to second that refusal, but with Councillor Amos's agreement, I don't think we can say that it's because the government inspector's decision is not being observed in its entirety, because the applicant is allowed to come back and apply for further conditions. So what I would suggest is that we refuse on the grounds that the accumulated variations are not acceptable, and that should the committee think otherwise, I would like to see the amplified condition number 3 as part of the
Two things worry me. One of them is that the objectors, at least one of the objectors said that there are far more changes than we have here. We've only got 9 changes in this application. And they say that there are others. That concerns me a great deal. I have a feeling that we are going to see this one again. There's probably another tranche of changes coming up in another application. And I'm also concerned by what Sim said about how we're really only looking at the outside. What I might have misunderstood that, but we say, yes, you can build this, and you have to build it according to the submitted plans, and they do include the inside. And I think what's going on with the outside could be hiding a whole load of stuff going on in the inside. So I just want to make those 2 points. I'm inclined to go with refusal.
Councillor Denner.
I'm not actually hearing the planning ground. so far, not liking it and annoyance with the applicant, unless there's been a change in planning legislation and training, not adequate grounds for refusal.
Yes, I would advise that the reason for refusal as put forward at the moment, when we are, firstly, what we are assessing in terms of application in front of us is the change. What was approved, and it's those elements of which are changed which you are assessing. And it is acknowledged by the fact that the council, at the last meeting when we determined the application for the non-material amendment, considered that the cumulative impact was so great that we couldn't deal with it through the non-material amendment process, which it then dealt with as this planning application. What's in front of us now is what you're assessing is the difference between what was approved and changes that have been made. And Councillor Denham is entirely correct. If you are minded to refuse that, you will need to demonstrate where you consider that the changes are adversely impacting upon the visual appearance of the building, for instance, or are such that they are that they're causing harm. The fact that there's lots of them isn't necessarily justification in its own right. It would be that the changes as built are unacceptable from a visual impact, if that's where you think that's taken place. So I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, because it's you to make those decisions. And it's only right and proper that you come up with your own reasons for refusal. But at the moment, the cumulative change wouldn't be a planning reason. It would be whether or not you thought that the changes that have taken place are unacceptable and cause harm.
We said that, Mr. Chairman, in the discussion. It is visual. We're told we don't know what's on the inside, but I agree with Councillor Bissett. Goodness knows what's going on the inside. So it's only what we've got. It's the visual aspect of it. We've seen all the pictures. We've had discussion about it. So it is on the visual, the cumulative visual appearance of it.
I'm struggling with cumulative visual impact. Does that represent harm? I didn't get that impression.
Well, why are the speakers here then?
I suspect it's the level of frustration they have, which I think is reflected within the committee. That's the nature of the planning process.
But Mr. Chairman, it's pointless, isn't it? We have a report here with all these changes. Here they are. We've had pictures, and it is the view of some members of the committee who have expressed an opinion so far that cumulatively they are not acceptable. That is our judgment. That is a decision we're entitled to take. Otherwise, why is the committee here if we can't make a decision of that nature, that collectively, in combination, all these changes make a material difference to the original application, material as given and as accepted. Mr. Manning said it is material, so we're considering something that was material, and our view is that as a consequence of that, it is not acceptable.
Proposed acceptance. No, I'm still not hearing planning reasons. What is unacceptable about windows being back?
So if we take this in order of the Councillor Amos has opposed refusal. That's second it. On that basis, we'll go to the vote on that and we'll see what the result is.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify the ground of, is it always the exact wording of the grounds for refusal? I know that it would be delegated, the precise wording. But are you saying that the changes amount to different and unacceptable from a visual impact?
Yes, subject to what Councillor Agar agrees, is the cumulative visual impact. And as with the new system of delegation to the Chair and Vice Chair, obviously the wording can be made more precise if it needs to be. It's the whole point of us having the new process, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I think the what we're trying to get at is, are you? I think what my colleague is trying to say is that to form the reason for refusal, was just seeking clarity on that. So what you're saying is that the cumulative changes have an adverse visual impact upon the appearance of the building. I can't lead you in that, so you need to. That's what I'm saying. Is that what you're saying?
Focus.
Proposal is that, contrary to recommendation, the planning to refuse changes substantially different. Delegates authorities to the corporate director of planning and governance, subject to consultation, to confirm the final wording of
Seconder. May I actually add to that? Fencing that has been erected around.
that amendment. All those in favour? Against? 3? Sorry, Councillor, didn't see your hand. So that's been refused, thank you.
Which is 55 Sidbury. And we have Francis Fosh and Sam to speak. The officer will do the presentation. If both of you wish to speak, in which case you've got 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So this is an application at 55 Sidbury, also known as the Primo restaurant, and on the corner of City Walls Road and Sidbury. If I could move to the next slide, please. So this is the site location plan. Now, the red line reflects the entire area of the site ownership. The Ordnance Survey hasn't been updated as yet, as is often the case with Ordnance Survey, to reflect the approved scheme, but the approved scheme that was approved under the 2014 application has been commenced. So if we can get to the next slide, please. So this is the application. It's an amendment to a previous application which was refused. So this is the site, the view looking from City Walls Road, looking across to 57 Sidbury at the back. Next slide, please. And this was the approved ground floor layout. Next slide, please. But first floor layout, sorry. This is the ground floor layout.
help if I put my glasses on, sorry. See, there we go. Sorry, next slide, please. And again, this shows the elevations of the proposed building. Next slide, please. Again, revised elevations, further elevation site. Thank you. Next slide, please. And again, this is the front elevation showing the extensions. Next slide, please. So this shows the terrace or the as built or as being built, I should say. Please. And this shows the application that's now before you. So what the applicant has done is, or is proposing, is to put a further building to the boundary with 57 Sidbury to block out views and noise, but also then use the roof as of the single-storey extension as approved as an outdoor terrace. Now, we're seeing this, we saw one at the last committee for the feathers, a slightly different situation in terms of the situation on site, but again, similar circumstances. And you can see there at the front balustrades and a boundary around it to ensure that people don't fall off onto the City Walls Road. Next slide, please. And again, this is a view from looking at the terrace and showing the balustrades and the building and the stairs down into the main bar. Slide, please. Sorry, thank you. So yeah, as I said, this is an extent. The first slides were the approved extension, and as I say, those have been built. And the proposals now are to use the flat roof of that extension as an outdoor terrace, and that is what is before you today. The application is recommended for approval, and we have proposed a number of plan conditions. That is the situation that we're at. Thank you.
With reference to the relocation of toilets, under the terms of the off-licence, the outside area must be completely vacated by 11. Concerning this application, 11 p.m. when the customers, where do they go? Will these new outside toilets be left open, allowing the outside areas past the designated time? This would expose the residents of 57, 59 and the flats at Amber Wharf to constant human noise, constant use of water being till 1 or 2 a.m. Apart from this, my problem is right up tight to my ancient brick garden wall. My building is grade 2 listed, and I'm very proud about my garden wall, parts of which are medieval. How deep are the foundations for all the toilets? Building in such close proximity will definitely affect my wall. If the toilet block were moved back to the other side, as the original plan showed, this would be less intrusive. The toilets would also then be attached to the main building with access internally. The area the other side of my wall would then be used for more waste disposal bins, bottle banks, etc., which would be needed considering the sheer volume of new customers.
Good afternoon. The Amber Wharf flats, situated at the back of 55 Sidbury, directly overlook Rose Roof Terrace. Sidbury has always been a mixture of residential and retail, busy in the day, quieter in the evening, home and traffic actually subsides. In contrast, the noise from outside roof terrace, on the scale proposed, is only likely to increase during an evening of outside drinking and eating. noisiest as the local residents are winding down before bedtime. Effects will be greater during the summer when residents and bars alike have their windows open. Noise of people socialising is very different from passing traffic noise, which naturally tails off during the evening. Noise report commissioned by the applicant gives no assurances or commitment that the wall will make any difference. The moment it is passed, it will allow for a roof terrace 10 times larger than originally allowed. Also, the building current licence allows for sale of drinks between midnight and every night, giving it hours more akin to a nightclub, restaurant, and a residential area. The local residents have a right to a peaceful night's sleep at a reasonable hour. Licence conditions of the building, I think, should reflect this. So I hope the committee use a 10-fold increase in the roof terrace.
Questions for either of the speakers?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm content that the noise carries after midnight. It's got a lengthy while than it is because it's quiet piece, and you were there before this application. But is there a current noise problem? Have you experienced? Because the previous was smaller, I know, but did you get anything? And have you reported it? That was the other thing.
There's been generally there has been a problem with the building in the past. Tenants.
What I meant to the regular house services, did you report that? Has somebody been checked that? Because that's the evidence base, I'm afraid, that we have to adhere to.
It has been, I believe it has been reported, but not by myself.
Thank you. What I'd like to do, with your permission, Chair, is to ask the officer a question. Depending on his answer, I may have a question for Mr. Coomber. That's all right. In 8.1 in the application, which is on page 8, there is mention of a rear wall that is to be built. Is that actually an acoustic wall or just an ordinary wall?
That's an ordinary wall, Councillor, so as I say, but obviously walls do box and have an impact on noise, but as I say, I'm not aware it has acoustic properties.
So may I ask Mr. Coomber a question? Mr. Coomber, would it be more acceptable to you if there were an acoustic wall preventing noise coming through to local residents?
I can't speak for the actual properties that neighbour onto it, but from the point of view of Amber Wall Flats, it's an open terrace, so the wall is going to makes a visual, it stops a visual impact without putting a roof on it.
I wonder if it's possible to give just a question about involvement of regulation. I'm aware of quite a lengthy history when a business was last functioning premises. Not easy, a précis of
You want me to go over the noise? They've gone back. Noise issues continually all the last 4 in resident. I have a phone number for the police, which if there's noise after 11 o'clock, I have to phone. I get an instant number. I've had probably 40 of those. I bought Charlie's in 1986, so my experience with this building goes a long way. But I've had I've had 3 lots of sound equipment in Ford. They're excessive noise. They've gone on till 2 in the morning. We've had nightclub, a couple that ran it as a nightclub. If I could just read this piece I didn't read to you. The original plans for number 55 were passed in 2000. Within this permission was clause 10, which states that the building has to be closed at 12:30 a.m. This was to protect neighbours and local residents. 2010, the tenants appealed to remove this clause. The planning refused this. So the tenants sent an appeal to the planning, then visited Sidbury. They too turned down this application. They deemed the area of Sidbury to be mainly residential and no extension to opening and licensing hours should be given. When the lease was sold, 55 became Bindles and somehow granted a 1 a.m. Tenants upheld the extended hours. There were 3 years of noise issues after 11 p.m., all documented with the police and environmental health. 3 years later, another set of leaseholders ran 55 as a nightclub with a teenage customer base, DJs dancing using huge speakers, etc. I approached them with the concerns and they told me if I didn't. I've since found out from licensing that should music be played at 1 minute 11, the license will be in breach of the license. So I've had a fighting battle to try and get anybody to, along with Helen Cameron from Mental Health, who sadly couldn't be here today because she's not well, to actually get to the point where we actually know that they should turn their music off at 11. We've been fighting till, that in my place officially, till 1 o'clock one morning, having gone into Primo, as it was then, and asked them to turn their big loud speakers off, and then came and sat officially in my flat. And we couldn't hear each other talk. It was dreadful, because my building is old, and I think they're all empty walls, and wood is a good contractor of sound, so my building is, so it's about 500. So I've had an awful lot of problem all the way along the line with noise. Yeah, so I have found out since if they should have turned their music, if they turn their music off 1 minute past 11, they're actually in breach of their license. But this is the battle that I've had, and today, the fact that nothing's going to be done about this license, because enforcement, they go in with every new tenant and say you have to be empty at 12:30, because somewhere along the line they've got this 1 a.m. drinks license, which we don't know how they got it, which then it allows them to extend till 2 in the morning. So I've given up on that one. Win. But no, I'm really concerned about those toilets being wide. It's got coping stone. A lot of the
Can I introduce Steve, who's from WRS? You want to talk in?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've put our point in terms of reference to the assessment that was submitted, which is an opinion. I said earlier, there's a lot of sort of buts. On the on tail. The point in the noise assessment was that noise from the road, City Walls Road, is dominant. Yeah, and I tend to probably agree with that in terms of the terrace houses behind the site, perhaps not so much in terms of adjacent property, pretty well screened from. And of course, as night goes on towards 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, traffic reduces, background noise levels go down. But again, it's not a predictable noise source that we're looking at. They have proposed to put this wall up, which will be an acoustic wall. You know, it's a solid wall. Noise levels from people talking on that side of the wall, probably similar to what there would have been with them talking at ground level, with a similar size wall between them and the adjacent property. But again, say it's not a predictable noise source. There's no standards involved. It'll be down to the management. Or well behaved. Minimize any impact.
Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I was going to ask the question to the officer before I asked the question to this young lady. First, about the change of the toilets to the and having a bin, sort of, that's the request. Would that be something, condition that we could put on, or are we content with the applicants? I don't know if the applicants are here or not.
My comment on the toilet block was actually built away from the ancient wall. So it's got its own back wall. Doesn't impact on the...
Other than the toilet, so why can't we have a variation of that? That's what I would like to ask the officers, if it is a practical problem or... then I'll...
So can I get slide 50 up, please? Yeah, so this is the layout of the first floor and the second floor. And you can see the toilets are off the wall, as I'm interpreting them. Yeah. That's the existing ancient wall. And then there's a corridor and then the toilets. How I...
toilet block, but they can also go into the business. So the other side, by my wall, they've got to go outside, lighting, you've got to have all sorts of things. And they have to go across the courtyard, which they have to, are not allowed to go 11 o'clock out into that area. So those toilets would be better off bottom. Go in and out of the main building.
I'm trying to think of my... Well, firstly, councillors, obviously there is the Party Wall Act, so any kind of amendments to the party wall would go through that. In terms of the ground floor, obviously there is a toilet block there, but there's also, that's accessed from internally from the new extension. So that wouldn't just be accessed from.
When they built the glass house, they converted the antique was to the glass house. Party wall arrangement with them because of my wall. So really, I feel that I ought to have a party wall agreement now, but
Imagine they are, but as I say, there's no change in the legislation. That would be between the applicant and the owner and the neighbour. But again, it's outside the planning legislation.
Are we all as equally confused? Councillor Denham?
I mean, I think the thing to clarify, or if Fran, so the existing planning permission, the toilets are what we last had on screen and would be internally at the application that we have in front of us is to move those toilets. They're external to the hospitality business and have to be accessed across a courtyard and puts it next to. Correct understanding?
yeah.
Takes me back to my question about if we're going to have a set of toilets backing onto an standing from that.
I think if, sorry.
Yeah.
So, Councillor, that would be down to the details of the construction in effect. I've just realised that the ground floor plan isn't on the presentation, so I'm just looking at the plan as proposed now, public website. So the that's it. Yeah, sorry, they're not on the presentation, but they are in your application pack, in the report. So. The short answer is, Councillor, that would need to go through building regulations. It would need to go through the Party Wall Act. There would need to be details agreed with the neighbour. Whether or not it's a separate wall, again, that would need to be how that construction takes place. Building regulations. Apologies for the confusion. Didn't realise. Preparation my slides. So it's page, figure 2, page 71 is the proposed ground floor plan. Again, we could condition that those toilets aren't accessed. Yes, checking whether or not there's appropriate toilet facilities. Rest of the within the main building, but as I say, I can't see toilets. And that would be compromising the capability of the building to operate toilets. Then do that, although there are some on the first floor. So, yeah, I would suggest we can't condition no access to the toilets 11 o'clock. Basically, because it might be needed for the facilities.
Further down the track with building control.
Right, yes, in terms of the construction methodology, that would need to be building control, party wall act.
Thank you, Chair. I think we got to the question. That's very helpful. I mean, I would make a condition that they're all internal, but anyway, that's another matter. The question I have for you, I didn't know that your concern was noise, because the young man before you brought the noise bit out. That's why I asked the question. And you said that you suggested it's a lost cause. What makes you think that, because there's equipment there, would be evidence-based? If it is, that we could, secondly, regulatory services, they apply and enforcement can be done. So, sorry, forgive me. You said there was a lost cause, about you've given up on the noise element. And I adhere to that, because if there is equipment being replaced, and that suggests that there is an enforcement action that we can take. So, you know, I don't see that as an obstacle. The conditions are for the licence to have that. If they're not adhering to them, then we can take action against, but not in this committee. This is a planning.
Yeah.
Yeah, through you, I'll ask the same question to Steve. If that we've had some mitigation evidence, noise, and I'm sure we've got plenty of equipment to install to find that evidence. You said that something about there was a City Wars Road noise. I mean, that doesn't get fashioned after 10 o'clock. I can understand in the morning, but traffic isn't that at late night.
Oh, no. And that's what I've said. That's what we've said in our comments. Towards the end of the evening, road noise will be less. Masking effects on people talking will be lowered. Depends how loudly people are talking.
Sorry, Chairman, through you again. As you know, it's extended the outside elevation, if you like, and if you have more than 5 people, I'm sure the spirit of things in the evening, things tend to go out of the cancer. As your professional opinion, that would rise, not lower it, surely.
As you say, it's not predictable. So, no standards. It's down to the management to ensure people don't disturb the next door neighbours.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. One, is your wall listed for heritage purposes? So, and your whole property is Grade 2, including the wall? I don't think we've had a report from the heritage.
We did. He's getting back to us, but he hasn't. We asked him to be here.
The second question is, you said that you prefer to have the bottle bank next to your wall.
They have to put their waste somewhere. On the plan, it does show that between their gate and the toilet, there is room for their refuse. Pictures over there of the refuse bins were outside. With the extra 35 staff, I think, that are mentioned, etc., and the extra customers that are going to be generated from this whole thing, they're going to need at least twice that many. So that would take up from the gate to where they're considering, that would take up that whole area. I mean, I know from my waste bins, and we're not open long hours at the moment, but I know in the past. I had, and I'm minute compared to. So that has to be taken into account. Where those toilets, where he wants to put the toilets, really should be all waste bins. I mean, it's like noise. It's no good living near a pub and then moaning about the noise. It's going to be noise generated. Same with the refuse. There's going to be refuse. There's going to be refuse bins. So I don't mind them the other side of my wall because they've got lids. But I do object to the fact that this might damage my wall. To build the sewerage system underneath the toilet block is not going to be shallow, it's going to be deep. Well, when they opened up the City Walls Road, down some buildings to open the entrance, a lot of the soil was thrown into the gardens, and 55 and 57 have a much higher ground than 50, the Floral Roundabout. Due to this level, you come out of my ground and you walk up steps to my backyard. So that wall goes deeper than it actually looks because it's been filled both sides. If they start digging down with a mechanic, they're going to damage the part of the wall we can't see. Further down building, before you come up to the level, you can see the whole of the wall made bricks. You know, it's something I love. I'm creating this wall, cobwebs, and it's so. Don't want it to be damaged.
I was asking about the bottle bins. Was obviously at the end of an evening and the premises closing at 1. Bottles being put into a bin after 1 o'clock in the morning when they tidy up.
Yeah, we had this.
You're quite happy with that situation?
No, we had this in the past. Environmental health. Ojats, they'd go out and do that, and the environmental health asked them to do it in the mornings and not to do it at 2 o'clock in the morning, because that's a horrendous noise as they bring all this stuff out and chuck it into the bottle bank, particularly. So that was an issue, and there's been lots of other issues, but we've, out.
Marjorie?
I don't actually have any questions for the public speaker. Am I speaking at the right time? Oh, I mean,
Are there any more questions for the... Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify something in the report. On page, on page 71, the third bullet about the relocation of the toilets says they're going to be relocated to the northern boundary of the site. Surely that's the southern boundary. I know it's a small thing, but, it could lead to confusion. It doesn't help the fact that we can't see which is north and which is south, but City Wall surely is north. Sorry? Well, but the thing is, they're going to be relocated to right adjacent to the wall with number 55. 57. And then I'd also like to say that if these are the only toilets and they're going outside, I just don't think that works. Everybody using using this restaurant, whether they're inside or out, are going to be traipsing out to those toilets. And I don't know enough about whether that constitutes a planning reason, but on that basis, I think I'm against.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's about 7 years, 4 months since I last sat before you on this very application, or the 2014 one. Quite a bit's been said there from the other speakers. I mean, whilst we're sympathetic with Mrs. Fosh's concerns, I think it's very important for this committee to remember what this application is for. It's not about past experiences from previous operators, etc. This application is made by the owner of the site. There's new intentions for the site, which I'll come on to later when I'm speaking, but it's very important just to focus on what we're dealing with here. It's unfortunate what's happened previously, but you have assurances from the applicant that this in a very diligent manner. And as has been pointed out by Worcester Regulatory Services and also in the committee report, there's obviously the Environmental Protection Act, which is available for any nuisances site in any event. Now, the ancient wall, you've got comments in your committee report from the Conservation Officer. There's no reference to this in there from them. And also to confirm the toilet block is to be built independently of the wall. So it isn't relying upon that wall in any way as part of that structure. And just to confirm the issue on the toilets in the building, there are other toilets internally. There's toilets on the first floor and, correct me if I'm wrong, the second floor. And they obviously, so then in terms of the outside access toilets, if you were minded to put a curfew on those, for example, 11 p.m, then that is open to you to do so, because there are other toilet facilities that can be utilised by patrons in the property. So that again is with the agreement of the applicant. So turning to what I had prepared, the application proposes some alterations to the original site extension that was granted back in November 2014, and as confirmed by your officers has been implemented. Most of the alterations, in our opinion, are minor in nature, relating to the relocation of the toilet block, maybe not, alternative fenestration detailing and the introduction of the glazing balustrades. The proposed roof terrace being the element I thought was probably going to be of most concern, and I will go on to talk about that. The proposed roof terrace is no different in its nature to the existing garden area that already exists to the rear of the property, a part of the site that is closer to the neighbouring flats of number 1 to 4 Amber Wharf. Provide the neighbouring properties, particularly number 57 and numbers 1 to 4 Amber Wharf, with some comfort over the proposed roof terrace from a noise perspective, the applicant commissioned a noise assessment. Now, the key findings of the noise assessment were the existing noise levels in the area are high. The City Walls Road is the main noise source in the area. There is screening provided on the terrace. A new 2.4 metre wall is proposed between the site and number 57 Sidbury, dealing with any potential overlooking issues also. There are existing similar uses in the area, including live music associated with the business at number 1 Sidbury. We are in we've talked about residential properties in this area, but this is very much part of, extended part of the city centre. It is a mix of residential, commercial, late night venues, shops, etc. And we need to remember the context when we're thinking about this application. The main statutory consultee, and we've heard from them today, and the council's relied upon experts on noise, Worcester Regulatory Services, agree with the findings of the noise assessment. This being that noise from the patrons on the proposed roof terrace will not adversely impact on the neighbouring properties, particularly those of 57 Sidbury and 1 to 5 Amber Walk. Now, the applicant is aware that last month's planning committee members supported a roof terrace proposal at the Feathers Public House on the tithing. Now, in doing so, 2 additional conditions were added by members. The first relating to a curfew for the use of the roof terrace. Now, the applicant is happy to accept 11 p.m. curfew for this roof terrace. And secondly, there should be no live or ambient music on the roof terrace. If members require this assurance here, then the applicant again is happy for this condition to be imposed. Now, members are aware this building has stood empty now for nearly 2.5 years. It's in a very prominent position in Sidbury. And even considering the COVID pandemic, the local owners are committed to this new project and these building works to bring forward a new venue for Worcester, very much adding to the city centre's food and drink offering and economy. And I believe they should be applauded for that. It is therefore respectfully requested that members seek to approve the recommendations of the council officers grant planning permission this afternoon.
You've answered my question, because my question was going to be about conditioning. But if you're content to accept it, I think that's more than an advantage to us to actually contain the noise post 11 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor. I think one of the other concerns that was raised was the impact on on the wall in terms of digging. I would suggest, therefore, perhaps an archaeology condition might be appropriate in this instance. It is in an archaeological sensitive area, and that would then safeguard those kind of aspects in terms of consideration.
And presumably, the toilet block can be built on a slab rather than... Pat.
Question, Chair. Seeking to clarify the conditions in relation to what Mr. Ball has said. I would think that no amplified music on the terrace then, since Mr. Ball says that is acceptable. And a management plan for the use of the terrace to be submitted before the terrace is used.
The other one, I think, would be
The curfew on the outside loo.
the outside toilet.
Happy with conditions.
Thank you. You can see there's actually a view of the cathedral on a terrace would be rather attractive. My concern is that there's a hell of a lot of air pollution in that area. Sidbury is a funnel of air pollution at certain times of the day. Have you taken that into account in any way?
We haven't done our own air quality assessment. Seeing if the air quality comments we receive from WRS. No adverse comments from WRS. I mean, from our perspective, it's obviously a big commercial decision to go ahead and build the extension, particularly in still emerging. So you will see what's happening. There were concerns that something like this would work, and there were concerns about that would obviously impact building works. The applicant's very in the roof terrace, add and enhance the offering in this location.
Questions on my own. Follow up on that. I think normally the air quality impact, whether application in itself. I think Jenny's question was about a potential impact on clients at roof terrace. So that if you, as a view there, before I ask my question.
Councillor is correct. in development is looked at from the impact, the potential wider impact on air quality from the use, so people drive in there, as it were. In terms of exposure to poor air quality, we wouldn't make comments because the standard for air quality is over a 24-hour period. People wouldn't be there for long enough, even if it was really bad, to get exposed. And also, as soon as you move away from the curb, the particulates and NOx concentrations go down exponentially. And there are some barriers at the consideration.
Fortunate, really, because I was going to ask Councillor Amos.
Sorry, I just came to me. If we think about Benedicto's on the corner there, okay, similar road network. Obviously, they've got their open curbside eating area out right on the street front there. So you could argue that's actually more exposed than an elevated terrace.
Benedicto.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad that you were listening to some of the comments of the residents have concerns about it. And I still got the issue that would you be prepared to ask your client to remove the toilets on the other side of the wall, north side, I suppose, when you're coming anyway, where the bin is situated further from the residence. Will that be an obstacle for your clients or not? And the other question that you quite concernedly maybe postpone on the previous, and you're not wary of that, but the building is, so whoever comes in, even your new tenants probably will move on and something. So once we give planning permission, it's for a site, not for, so anyway, that's another matter. But if it's possible for you to ask the clients, I don't think it's quite a big thing. You can alter the plans to suit, if you like, either if they want to bring them internally. The other question that I'm asking for you, and you can ask your clients, is that I know you proposed 11 o'clock. Would 10 o'clock would be suitable? Because that once it's 11, it tends to go on from 11, and I think the ladies had said that it's very difficult to monitor because it takes past 11, and then you'll be contravening your license, or they will be, not yourself, but your clients will be. So would you be happy to ask them if a condition would be eligible from outside and the terrace at 10? And obviously the music thing sort of comes on anyway. I don't think you're asking for live music anyway.
It'd just be useful for me to understand where you would lock the toilet, or where you're thinking the toilet block could be located, because at the moment, building, if you move it away from the building, put it further away from the, probably moving it closer to Amber Wharf, further away from number 57. The idea is obviously, if it's closer to the building, people have got less, it's more integrated, even though they have to go outside to access it. If you put it further away, there's obviously, you could get people loitering outside, although it is a beer garden in any event. I think that's what we need to remember here. If we're talking about 11 p.m. curfew, people can already use the rear garden space and have done at the previous use, in effect, to drink out there. So if we're saying 11 o'clock on the toilets, yeah, you're saying, look, we've got to balance this between the commercial realities of the situation. There's a huge amount of investment that's potentially going into this site. It's sat there for 2.5 years, done nothing. We're talking significant investment. There's got to be a balance struck between what's commercially viable and what isn't really. 10 o'clock, we know how people, we know how economy works. We all go out and eat and drink, and I think restricting it to 10 would probably not make it worthwhile. Now, we're accepting condition on the management of it. We've talked about a drop-dead curfew of 11 o'clock, so that would effectively mean that is people off the terrace at 11. I think we know it's not going to be monitored or managed as if, say, a nightclub or a late-night bar in that respect. People would be asked to, leave at 11, and you think the 11. Practically would just be, we're drinking up. We'll either go inside, or that's the end of their evening. So it's not as if it's going to be, it's 11 o'clock. You've got another 15 minutes to up. It'll be quarter to. Pick this up in the management statement in part of the condition. In effect, it's a 15-minute warning, however you want to call it, and the drop-dead date is 11 o'clock, and that's effectively when it gets shut. We've got to look at it at the moment. There's an existing situation with the downstairs, the garden outside, where people are already outside at that time anyway. You could argue this is probably is a less intrusive area because it's further away, it's closer to the City Walls Road, rather than the beer garden or whatever the garden area at the moment, which actually sits between Amber Wharf and obviously the back of 57. At least for this area, it's a lot better screened, and you're adjacent to that City Walls Road, which, as we know, is the main area.
Thanks, Joe. In an effort to move this on a little, can I propose the recommendations with the aforementioned conditions, and also including a curfew of 11 o'clock on the roof terrace, since that is clearly acceptable? That should be included in the management plan. So with those, may I propose the recommendation? Sorry, are you still questioning?
Yeah, I've got, given there are, you say, other toilet facilities within the building, and the 2014, was that additional toilet facilities? Why are you looking for the outside?
It's just the relocation, Councillor Denham, in order to make the space work better. Simple as that, really. The size of the premises, and obviously now with the outdoor space that we're proposing, there is a necessity for more toilet facilities, and it's making that work. You know, it's not something, when you look at the previous plans, toilets were pretty much bang in the middle of the space, not really an ideal situation. So what we've looked to do is try to move them away, so they're out of the way. It's not something you want sat in the middle of the ground floor area. In effect, when you're looking at an outdoor space and an indoor space, they were bang in the middle. Now they're being relocated to a boundary, or just off a boundary, and in order to allow the commercial space, the entertainment space, to flow a lot better. So it's just that it's a commercial decision in terms of how the building is going to work and how the space is going to work in terms of number of patrons, efficiencies, etc. So it's you know, where it was just didn't work when you got into the detail and talking to an actual operator of how they want to operate the space. And the ideal scenario was to move it to an edge, and that in effect meant that you needed to access it externally. And given the fact that there is a balance between outdoor and indoor space, we didn't see that as a big indoors or outdoors.
The 2014, although the work has yet been built, yet been occupied, further expansion of business commercial space above and beyond the 2014 approval. So in terms of business case, what increase in planning for in terms of toilet facilities and waste? So, you know, an expansion from business that last operated there 2.5 years ago, we're looking for substantial expansion when implemented, and give us a feel for that, and then the further expansion that would be achieved if this.
So obviously got the consent back in 2014, which I was the agent on at the time. As stated now, we've been in discussions with the City Council on this way before the commencement of development took place, and obviously the hoardings that you can see around the site now. So we've been in discussions with the council mid-2020, so in the height of the pandemic, with a view to hopefully getting a planning permission a lot sooner, or an amendment to this planning permission a lot sooner, and probably look to have been running by now. Now, obviously, there's been delays in that. In terms of, so it's been something that's been in the thinking for a long time since the previous occupiers or operators have ceased trading. It's been the design. So we need to remember here, the actual applicant is the owner. And it's the owner who now wants to come forward and actually operate the premises in conjunction with joint venture partners. And he's got a track record in the city and outside the city in doing that. So hopefully that gives you some comfort and some assurances in that respect. Now, in terms of what does it do to the space, I think it's just a product of where we've gone through over the last 2 years, that there is now more of a design. You can see it from the application you dealt with last month at this very committee, where outdoor space is a lot more of an attractive offering. Your fellow councillors already noted, you know, the views that you can take advantage of the cathedral from that roof terrace, and really it's part of if we're going to go ahead and put this substantial investment in and building this side extension that was granted in 2014, there's an opportunity there to create this roof terrace coupled with the existing garden space outdoors and give that al fresco style feel and that offering, I think, is pretty unique for the city, and I don't think anywhere else could offer it in this nature. So I think it's a commercial decision that is taken advantage of, you know, a great position and a great building that makes things stack up, that the applicant's prepared to invest the significant money that is warranted to undertake these building works.
With due respect, I don't think you've actually answered. The expansion of the building, and we're looking at the application in front, the expansion of that building, what increase in business, what increase in clientele, what increase in waste disposal as a result of that is expected? And as the building owner, the facilities need to be adequate to whatever the future business plan is.
I mean, I've just consulted with the applicant there. We think that roof terrace could probably accommodate around 50 patrons. Now, in terms of, if you're talking about waste management, etc., we know to the rear of the property within, so we've got an existing outdoor area at the moment. The roof terrace is clearly going to be far more, so we could even say the outdoor space at the moment to the rear that was used extensively by the previous operator, could be transferred to, it would effectively be transferred to the roof terrace. I know where I'd rather be if I'm sitting outside. And therefore, in terms of any waste disposal or space for waste disposal could then be accommodated to the rear of the property. Extensive. But to answer your point in terms of what it does in terms of additional business, then could obviously occupy the roof terrace over and above what would also be.
Thank you. Is this questions for the applicant, and then we'll move to.
No. Mentioned the tithing a couple of times last month where we discussed that, and the 11 o'clock rule came in for all outdoor spaces. So it wasn't, no, in your case it's the roof terrace, but it's also the garden downstairs, and that is to be closed as well, I take it.
That's not part of that's not part of this application, unfortunately. So anything to do with the existing nature of the building, the existing operation. So what's before committee today is obviously the changes to that original consent and those plans that is a historic or that runs with the property. So that would have to come under separate licence.
But we could make it a condition that you close the garden at 11 o'clock as part of it so that the noise wouldn't go out. Because if you're having, in the tithing, the noise was all cut off at 11 o'clock for outside activity. And you mentioned it as an example of what we've done before. So would you be content to say the whole garden is closed down for the same reason as the tithing consequence?
Yes, Councillor, we would.
More questions for the applicants? Questions, comments, proposal?
Sorry, with the aforementioned conditions, George has got those, with the inclusion of curfews on the use of the terrace, and is it possible to curfew the garden as well? Not.
One of the issues that you've got is even though the applicant may agree to something being imposed in planning law terms and in terms of precedent, can't seek to impose a condition that would otherwise that to address a pre-existing. That doesn't form part of the actual application. So the actual application is for the extension. They can seek to it, they can agree to it, but they can subsequently go to appeal on that if they so wish. It's for members to decide whether or not you want to include it, but there is a risk that they would take it to appeal on the basis that there is an unreasonable stress a pre-existing concern or a perception of a pre-existing of noise on an area which is not the subject of the.
Thank you. I thought that was the case. So we have a condition curfewing the use of the loos, a condition curfewing terrace, and a management plan for the whole. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think having had history with different businesses operating from this site, might be helpful to offer some explanation. One of the problems with the premises planning regime, the licensing, selling alcohol, live music. Currently, the licensing hours, planning. Separately again is, if you like, environmental health. But there isn't, pollution. And each of those things, those agencies have been. All parties, confusion between those and which should be forcing authority, which aspects. So could we be absolutely clear, what are the current planning conditions for the operation of a business? What way might they not change?
So the first focus of that is that we can't conflate licensing and planning regulations. In fact, the MPPF is absolutely specific and explicit on it in saying planning decisions should assume that these regimes will operate effectively, and we shouldn't make decisions trying to duplicate or second guess other regimes. And that's paragraph 188 of the MPPF. So the simple fact of the matter is we have to make an assessment based on the planning merits and leave licensing issues like the number of covers, operating hours, licensing hours, live music, and all those kind of aspects to licensing. We can't control those. What we have to say is, well, these are the bits we can control. It's the outdoor terrace, the use of the outdoor terrace, and those aspects and the conditions accordingly. So in terms of what we can condition and what we can control, those are we've already set out in terms of use of the terrace and the management plan for 11 o'clock, and the outdoor terrace is similarly, and the outdoor toilet similarly. We wouldn't be able to control anything the licensing or direct licensing, because that would be a separate control in itself. And I have the scars and the pains of public inquiries and appeals where, quite simply, I've been unable to defend those kind of planning conditions.
But just to be absolutely clear, the current planning approval says that the business hours are closed at 11 p.m. So there should be no activity under planning enforcement beyond 11 p.m. currently, whether it be indoors or outdoors. Because the business cannot operate beyond, under planning, beyond 11 p.m.
Again, councillor, the difficulty is, as I say, is licensing. If licensing, yeah, I know, but simple fact of the matter is, those kind of hours should be controlled by licensing, not by planning. And the simple fact of the matter is, that is where that control lies.
In a previous application, I don't know if it was 2014 or earlier, going back, these premises were an antique shop, So the change of use to a restaurant offer, planning put on a condition mindful of, planning responsibilities that no business should operate from those premises beyond 11 p.m. What licensing subsequently did is not a matter for this room. I'm trying to be certain that the 11 p.m. hours of operation of business from planning enforcement, are they still in place? Are they built into the 24 approval? Or they get carried forward if we're now looking at the current application today.
Unless I stand to be corrected, whatever the conditions are for the existing building will remain. Essentially, all we're looking at in terms of licensing and use is the external area, which the applicants already agreed that would not.
Sorry, councillor, just with regard to the planning permission, I'm just looking at the decision notice. There is no hours restriction. See in that decision, and the decision granted on the 13th of November. That's to the Bindles Bar, the P14D0330, no hours conditions restricting.
So what we're saying here is that we can condition the loos because they condition the terrace. As part of this application. The reason we're doing it is to protect the amenity of the residents to enjoy their.
Whatever pre-exists, pre-exists. You're happy to propose? Pat will second. Sorry, Pat opposed, you'll second. Not that it makes a great deal of difference. So we have a proposer and a seconder.
Just to restrict the use of the external toilets and the roof terrace to 11 p.m. No live or ambient music. Management plan and an extra condition regarding archaeology. Just all those in favour? Those against? 1. The motion's carried.
Can I call you all to order? And we'll go live.
Chair, may I just say that I had been unaware, I'm acquainted with a member of the public gallery.
Right. Land at Sheriff Street. Over to you, Andrew. The less than guarded message was keep it snappy.
Well, you'll be pleased to hear, Councillor, there's only two slides I can show on this one. So the rest of it's in our application report to you. So this is the well-known Sheriff's Gate development. And obviously, planning permission was granted in 2019. The application, or the reason we're before you here, is to amend the terms of the Section 106 agreement, which I understand has been to Planning Committee before, but this is relating to the provision of affordable housing. You may recall that as a result of viability, that the agreed offer was at 10%, and at the time of granting the reserved matters, it was all proposed within phase one. Following discussions, and probably best to go to the next slide, please, Margaret. So what you can see there are the four phases, or three phases of development. At the top is phase one, and at the bottom is phase two, which is the critical part, and in the middle is phase 3 and 4 of the development. So the proposal now is to move the affordable housing from phase 1 into phase 2. Now, as part of that, we would want assurances, and we set this out at paragraph 7.7, which is at page 50, or the top of page 50 and the bottom of page 49, and that the affordable housing would be delivered if anything unforeseen circumstances happened. So the four paragraphs A, B, C and D are our assurances that we are seeking, and we have been working with the applicant's agents to ensure that those are the terms of the deed of variation. So it's our recommendation that there's no worse situation. They're not being the affordable housing isn't being banished or ghettoised into a particular block. And our view is that providing these assurances are met, that there is no issue with the delivery of affordable housing on phase 2 rather than phase 1. That's it, Councillor.
Thank you. My only question is, so is the applicant agreeable to A, B, C and D?
So, yes.
Yes. Yes. Ready to sign, should we say? That's
I wouldn't
okay.
say ready to sign. I think there's what Georgina might have one or two typos and various other kind of things. So,
We're quite close to
We're already down to only 10% of affordable homes. We need affordable homes desperately in the city. So could you give the time frame of phase 1 and phase 2, please?
well, phase 1 ASAP is the short answer. I have discharge of conditions. I've been told that start on site is imminent, but I understand that we've all heard, well, I've heard similar statements elsewhere, so to speak, in terms of other developments, and I'm sure that. But as I say, my understanding is phase 1 is imminent. It would take probably 2-3 years for phase 1, but that doesn't mean that phase 2 can't start in them whilst phase 1 is coming along. In fact, that's what we're recommending. That's the terms of the bond, is that if there is any cease in development, then the bond kicks in terms of financial penalty. So, as I say, it would be, I understand the registered provider is also close to deal with the registered provider. That may bring forward the affordable housing quicker. But I can't give a specific timescale because we haven't got a specific date as yet. There's still remediation, demolition, and all these go on. Those things can take time, particularly if unexpected contamination is found.
Right, so on that basis, they're going to cherry pick the first tranche of work, and it could be years before part 2 actually starts. Is that right?
Cherry pick is not the wrong word, is not the right word, Councillor, I would use, because, as I say, there are financial penalties if, but obviously they've got, if they don't deliver the affordable housing. As we know, there is a viability issue, and that's why 10% was accepted in the first instance. And this is always the difficulty with regeneration sites, is there's always contamination, there's always these kind of difficulties in infrastructure and all these kind of aspects. So I wouldn't say cherry picking, but I would say there's a need to make sure that the development works. And as I say, it's not through a viability argument that we're moving it from phase 1 to phase 2. It's about the type of affordable housing that is being delivered.
I'm just wondering about the numbers of affordable housing. In paragraph 9.1, it says the total number is 47 units. But it seems to me that there's a possibility that that B in section 7.7 is applied. In other words, we get the sum of £1.2 million that covers the provision of 22, and then phase 2 never happens. So we're still left with a shortfall of 27 houses. Is that correct?
So basically, phase 1 is 212 houses, 212 units. So 10% of that is 22, because we go from the minimum, we round up, not down for affordable housing. So we would be, that's what the figure is seeking, is those 212. Now, we might use that money to bring forward development on our own basis and use the planning permissions that are in the area, i.e. phase 2. We may use our own powers of development, though that's for the future if the circumstances happen. But at the moment, as I say, phase 1 is 211, so 10% of that is 22. Therefore, we seek a financial bond in relation to that 10%.
It says in paragraph 7.4, amended definition of affordable housing. I mean, the negotiations around this going on for years. So, which definition at which point in time via the MP? What is regarded as affordable? Yeah, first of all, now, what definition of affordable housing at what point in time? Definition are we using?
So the definition has changed, as you rightly say. The MPPF was different to the planning policy statements before that, and those kind of things. So the MPPF 2012, which would have been what we determined the planning application on, that what we are just noting is that that definition has been widened, and that the government, through their wisdom and through their direction, have decided to add starter homes. There is first homes to come in at some point as well. You may have heard those initiatives. Starter homes, whether they are those kind of aspects. So what we're doing is we're saying this is the definition of affordable housing now. This is what we are expecting. This is how we will be seeking those affordable housing based on government guidance. But if government guidance changes, then we will need to make an assessment. But it's quite broad and quite wide, so I don't anticipate any, it might be terminology or definitions, so I don't expect that to go a lot further. But again, I can't anticipate central government. What we're doing here is noting what the NPPF says about what is affordable housing.
So we started out in 2012 with negotiated down to 30%. Negotiated. Developer is saying doesn't even want that. Wants it somewhere else. Read the report correctly.
I think, again, the developer does want the affordable housing. It is on site. It is on site. It is part of the development. It's just as a later phase. It's phase 2 rather than phase 1. So it's still part of the development, and it's just the timing and the delivery, so to speak.
But he might have time phase 2 to come back again. What if we were to say no?
We would have to go back to the applicants and try and find a way to deliver, which might be through amended designs and amended details to deliver the phase 1, the affordable housing on phase 1. It may be, again, I haven't given that all the consequences to that full assessment. I've assessed what's before me and what's been requested of me. So can I do that? And as I say, we've put forward the assurances that we're seeking. That's what the assurances read. To get the affordable housing, any penalties in place, contributions in place, if the development stops for any reason. So that we've safeguarded, I believe we've safeguarded the council's position to the agreed level of affordable housing at 10%. And therefore, we're recommending that. If we say no to this, then we've got to find an alternative solution, and then we'll have to come back to you with what that alternative is. We'll never get more than 10%.
Thank you, Chair. This is Groundhog Day today, isn't it? We've seen a lot of applications bouncing back to us. It does have outline planning applications of others. That said, I think really for me, the only thing that makes this application acceptable at all is the bond that is required, so that we actually do get the affordable housing at some point. And you find that, I mean, on page 44, it's listed in the requirements on page 44. So it's very clear to the applicant that this will be followed up. And the other thing it's not quite a matter for this application probably, but note the diversion of the footpath, and I just wanted to say a word about that. Although we don't deal with that in planning terms normally, footpath diversions, there is a scheduled monument above the woods. Now the woods and the pathway up to them are in the ownership of Ron Smith's estate. I say his estate because Ron Smith is with us any longer. That belongs to them. But at the top of the woods, just alongside Tamar Close, there's a square of protected land. And there's a scheduled monument on it, which is a civil war trench. So I want to be sure that when this footpath is moved, we do protect the Civil War trench. It is listed. So if we could just make sure that planning enforcement follows through on that. Other than that, with great reluctance,
Just assurance in the
You noted, yeah.
I mean, just to back up that, whilst it isn't a public right of way, because it is very heavily, a really, really important access use, local people. I do hope that if and as and when that moved, it is moved minimal and very, very heavily used.
Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I was here when it became 10%. My understanding was that we were reluctant to reduce that so the phase one could begin because the financial didn't stack up for them. So therefore, I'm just cautious that we are supporting something else and then maybe down the line there'll be another application to say, can we move it to phase three? Can we make this as a condition of some sort that you know, we do want affordable housing? That's the whole purpose of it. And, you know, taking away 30%, coming down to 10%, and we, you know, a long way away when we know that the city needs desperate affordable homes. I'm just conscious that doesn't fade, sort of prolonging the years on with other mitigation evidence that they were applicants bring. I mean, obviously, if I was probably applicant, I'd probably be doing the same thing, but we're not here for them. We're here for residents of the city.
Given we are where we are, at least this agreement does a cash lapses. Amos.
Yes, thank you. It's just a question, actually, Mr. Chairman. Paragraph 1.4, the ongoing negotiations, where it was agreed to reduce the amount of money for transportation contributions, massive reduction of 1.5 million. Can we be updated? Because short of going by car or bus, people have to move around by levitation, as I see it. If we're not going to support buses and we're not going to support cars, how are people going to get around? Because the number of people in this development isn't altering. Nature of the housing may, but the number isn't changing. So can somebody give us an update on how we're negotiating the loss of £1.5 million? And frankly, I don't know who the developers are, but they can't be very good, because given that house prices are increasing enormously, why they've got to keep taking out money for roads, money for schools, no public open space. Dearie me, I mean, they've got their sums badly wrong, haven't they? I could be a bit, perhaps I'm just being unduly suspicious, and I'm sure everything is above board and accurate.
Obviously, the previous, the planning committee agreed on 29th of July 2021 to, well, as I said, the committee did. Yeah, that, as I understand it, that deed of variation is, these amendments, or this deed of variation, in effect, will join into that deed of variation. Two will dovetail one document.
Will it come, presumably then it won't come back to this committee, Mr. Chairman, is that right? Once the negotiations are finished?
Yeah, that once negotiation, you've given us a resolution to go away and do that, so the committee will not need to make another decision unless they change the terms again, so to speak. But again, it will be textual changes, and George will be working hard to ensure that those are legal and above board and robust.
Just another example of where national planning law doesn't work. It's developer-led, and I think we're doing the best we can. Bad planning law. What means this used in section 7.6 and then in the recommended amendment. That's it. immediate, so we've got 38 social rented units and 9 intermediate units.
In the old days, councillor, you used to call those shared equity, but there's intermediate sale, which means you have a partial ownership and then rent part of it, but there's also intermediate rent as well. So it means basically there's an element of ownership by the eventual tenant or land or owner.
I just wondered if it was another category that wasn't included in A to D, but it's actually sort of D, is it? Right.
What I was going to say is, the members, and they're obviously expressing concerns regarding this, but actually, bonds is a very robust approach. Something that actually does guarantee that if they commence with phase 1, but they don't move to 2, we would be able to draw the bond down. So it's about as tough as we can get by seeking that control. So it is very robust. They have accepted it. Obviously that's why we brought it to you. Way forward, we think that we can move with this. Allow the development to progress, but also guarantee that if it doesn't progress past phase 1, the 20 would have been normally associated with phase 1 are bonded to us. So that's how it is a very robust approach.
So after phase 1, would there have been any other affordable units in any of the later phases?
No.
Certainly, I'm happy to propose the motion. Are you happy to second?
Thank you, Chair. The proposed is to approve the recommend. Those in favour? Against? Abstention?
Thank you, councillor. So again, this is an application for amendment to approved plans. This is to take account of changes to the that's required as a result of highway adoption and aspects. So first slide is the approved plan as presented to you previously. Next slide. Again, shows the street layouts and street scenes. There's no changes to these plans whatsoever. Next slide, please. And this is now the revised highway adoption plan. So this will now become the site layout plan, and this is the only plan that's being altered. Next slide, please. And you can see development has started. That's the oak tree. And just a series of photographs are again, next few slides, just keep scrolling through. Thank you. You can see again, development has started and we start obviously being laid out. So recommendation is for approval. I should note also there are other we're taking forward again as previously, we're taking forward a number of planning conditions. So that's why there's quite a lengthy section on the original planning conditions, but obviously we've discharged a wide number of those previously. So things are ready to go, so to speak, in terms of a large number of in terms of the development and its delivery of 16 affordable homes. Thank you.
Aaron, any highway comments?
I would just comment that these are very minor changes that Section 38 process to ensure that the site fully complies with our specification and then will be offered for adoption and will ultimately be adopted. They are, I would say, very much.
Any questions? I'm happy to approve. Happy to second, Councillor Amos. Very kind of you.
The officer's recommendation. Then, those again. It's carried.
Christopher Whitehead.
Across from the AstroTurf, you can see the main buildings next door. You can see the tree that's a little bit compromised, but as I say, the main buildings. Next slide, please. And again, a closer look there at the application site and the buildings around it. Next slide, please. And another look there at the trees, and in the background there, you've also got residential properties. The building in the foreground is a school building. Next slide, please. No, the tree, just for fairness, the tree, during the summer when it's in leaf, you can see it's had some work done recently. Branches. Next slide, please. That's the proposed layout. And next slide, please. Those are the proposed elevations. Recommendation is for approval, Councillor. There are no increase in staff or student part of the application form.
Thank you. Councillor Amos.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As in my ward, as you can see. I mean, Christopher Whitehead is an excellent school. My nephews and niece went there. I fully support this. They do need the provision, so I fully support it. And I'm actually very grateful they've brought it forward to increase the provision and facilities of what is an excellent school. So I've just got one question, which is on the highways issue, because highways have made a comment, and I think it's a very valid question, talking about that there will be no increase in staff and no increase in student numbers. And what highways are saying is they would like a deferral until clarification of that is confirmed. And I think there's a good reason for that, because obviously if there isn't enough parking for extra students, extra staff, and of course being a facility for autistic children, there may well be occasional visitors, ad hoc people coming and going. And the adjacent places where they might park, and where I have reason to believe some do park at the moment, causes very, very serious problems. There is no nearby convenient place to park. It's on a very awkward location, and there isn't any space. So I think it's important that all of the parking can be contained on site, and perhaps if an officer could confirm really that an answer to the question that highways have put, then I'll be happy to propose this go forward. So if we could just clarify that the numbers and the staff aren't going to increase, and therefore there won't be any adverse effect on parking on neighbouring streets.
Thank you, Councillor. I answered the question in paragraph 7.13 that the application form sets out there'll be no increase in student numbers or staff numbers. We consider that to be a definitive statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few things are definitive in this life. In that case, could I, through you, Mr. Chairman, just ask Ms. Hanchett, because she's come all this way, it's only fair I ask her something. Is she happy with, from the highways point of view, with that answer?
We are comfortable that the proposal does not result in any increase in pupils, staff. It is purely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In that case, I'm happy to propose.
Thank you. A couple of questions, if I may. I mean, I think, you know, it's a facility that is much needed. But, you know, there are traffic increase. Is it kind of any responsibility of ours, or do we ask the council that, you know, the design is completely appropriate to that very specific
We don't, not part of the planning process because a lot of those aspects are internal colours and the use of those kind of things, and painting, decorating, and making sure everything else is right. And it's very specific, but it has been, the design and access statement sets out how it has been designed specifically for the use, so to speak. So we've got the assurances within the design and access statement that they have taken account of what the end user is there to do, but we haven't asked the Education Authority.
Okay, whether, thank you, that's some reassurance. Given the outside space and losing a tree, put some conditioning tree and green landscape, again, given the nature of the pupils that will be using. Green landscaping, access to nature might be.
Councillor, I did give that some thought, but the red line is quite tightly constrained around the proposed building, and its associated space. The tree itself is not worthy of. There are a lot of tree protection orders on the site, as I'm sure you're aware, and there is green space, obviously, in and around the school playing fields as well. So we gave it some thought, but we didn't. There wasn't space within the red line to be able to put a new tree, give it the opportunity to grow healthily. So we chose not to put a planning condition seeking a replacement tree, but the tree itself is not of great health.
Jenny?
I very much welcome this. Christopher Whitehead, as probably people know, does not operate a selection policy on their students. Lots of other schools, or some other schools in Worcester do, which means that Christopher Whitehead has inherited from other parts of the city pupils who, in some respects, could be said to be more challenging. So anything to improve their facility, this classroom space is next to the Learning Resource Centre, as I understand it, and it just adds to the facilities and the expertise that's going to be available for a range of children. Thoroughly welcomed. In fact, it's next door to a reflective garden, if I remember correctly, because I was a parent there several years ago, and they've actually got a white garden with fountains and stuff. So children who need that respite at any point, for whatever reason, can go and sit quietly in that area. So that's already provisioned, which is excellent. So I think this is a no-brainer. It really should happen.
I was going to make the same, raise the point about the tree going, and do welcome this.
Thank you. Thanks. Whether there was a justification. In fact, I think that in the the paper, it might have sort of alluded to the fact these provisions set him just how effective straight into the I'm going to bore you with something now. The original Christopher Whitehead was the leader of the City Education Authority. As an educationalist, very much admired. And when the original Whitehead died, said of him, he had no narrow, quite neat for what's going on here.
Bill?
I concur with what's been said in this room. I think it is an excellent school. It's a well-deserved facility, and I lend my total support to the motion, and I'm more than happy to second.
Before we go to the vote, my only question, which you probably can't answer, is whatever happened to the bell tower? Remember that application?
Thank you, Chair. All I really wanted to say was that provision for autistic students is very much needed in the city. And this seems to me to be a very sympathetic design that doesn't actually shout at you. Because one of the things you really mustn't do is have anything that's too overt, I think, for autistic. So it's very nice to see this coming along. I'm delighted to see it. So.
Oppose the recommendation. All those in favour? 11, unanimous.
I only have one thing to say before we depart. Oh, yes. But two issues. First of all, apparently, do we wish to return to site visits in person? Yeah, I mean, it won't be every application, but those that require a site visit, are we content to go with that? Yes. Yeah, it's certainly informative rather than just the papers. Yes, yeah. Same arrangement as before. And the other issue of any other business is, unfortunately, it's Sim's last appearance with us. And I hope you'll concur, but I think he's been of immense benefit and he's made life a lot easier for us concerned in relation to previous planning meetings. So on behalf of the committee, I wish you all the best and thank you very much for your contribution.
Can I just, very briefly say, can I just add, because I've had a lot of dealings with Mr. Manley, I think it's been a transformation, frankly, since it's been here. And I think we all know what we mean. A transformation, all for the good, all for the better. And I think we're all we've benefited enormously from his work. I'm very sorry to see him go, but I understand he needs the money. So,
Many more.